Hello and welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Now, this week's show really does focus on something I think is emerging and very interesting. So, what we're seeing with all this new technology that is being developed at such an incredible speed, and I'm talking renewable energy, I'm talking battery storage, smart grid management, the software that runs those things, they're all developing at an incredible rate in ways that would have been essentially impossible to imagine even 10 years ago. And the new systems that are coming into play are really interesting and exciting. And the notion that renewables are intermittent and unreliable is fading. Basically, it's fading into history. And who I'm talking to this week is a really good example of this. Now, Chris Wright works for Moixa. Moixa install batteries, but more importantly, because the batteries they're just a dumb block of stuff that can store electricity. What's really interesting is the software that manages that, the way that loads of batteries in loads of houses can all talk to each other and do transactions. They run a thing called grid share. I'm not even going to begin to try and describe it to you because it's way beyond my pay grade, but Chris will explain all this. It's a fascinating conversation we had last month. It was really, really interesting. I will put links to Moixa in the show notes because it's really worth checking out what they're up to, including an electric car aficionados will know that this is an interesting development. CCS, connected vehicle to grid systems, that Moixa are working with Honda on installing in Islington in London. Very, very interesting development. For those of you who don't know, and there's no reason you should, I have a vehicle to grid system here. It runs on CHAdeMO, which is the Japanese system that is used by Nissan in the Nissan Leaf. And at the moment, that's the only way you can get a vehicle to grid system to operate. So a vehicle to grid system is clearly when electricity is going both into the car and out of the car. And so the wiring and the systems that are needed for that at the moment only operate on CHAdeMO, but it looks like they're going to operate on CCS, which is the more common European charging thing. That's what most cars that are sold in Europe have CCS. And most of the new chargers that are being installed, particularly the very high-powered ones, are using CCS. So it's kind of, it's one of those annoying battles between which is the better system. Yeah. Let's not talk about that now. Let's get onto the topic. Please welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast, Mr. Chris Wright from Moixa. Well, Chris, thank you very much for finding time in these. We're all so busy. I've rushed from my kitchen into the hall and then outside, and it's been frantic. Often when I interview people, I'm at a disadvantage if I know too much because I then forget to ask the right thing or something. But with you, with Moixa, I've heard of you for a long time. I've had quite a lot to do with you in the past, but I'm really quite ignorant, which is good. So I want to know some really basic stuff. So the one thing I'm fascinated with is grid share. So if you could explain that, but if you could maybe explain what Moixa does, where it started, what the idea was behind it, really.
Sure. The way we frame what we're setting out to do, or sort of our purpose or our vision, if you will, is to say that we believe that if we can raise the IQ of batteries, then we can really help the world to live off renewables. So we think that adding intelligence to how batteries are used is a key part of the energy transition. So everything that we do relates back to that kind of insight or back to that purpose where that's really everything we're doing is setting out to deliver that vision.
Because this is what's really interesting is, and I have these discussions all the time, is people do these very simple additions, like how much energy does the UK use in a year, and how many days in a year is it not windy or sunny, and then you've got to have one battery. I always like to think of it as going to be outside Doncaster, which is like 4,000 terawatt hours, massive box that costs $100 trillion. And what you're saying is entirely the opposite of that in a way.
Absolutely. So there will be a lot of batteries that have wheels on them.
Yes.
Yeah, and there will be a lot of batteries in people's homes. And what we're setting out to do is connect those using sort of internet technologies, the intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning type technologies. Using those technologies, bring that to how those batteries are controlled, how they operate, to give more back to the customer who's bought the wheels with the battery or the battery in their home.
Yeah.
But also then, because we're interfaced with thousands and thousands of batteries around the world, because we do that, then that enables us to make those available sort of in aggregate as a great big battery.
Yes.
But for lots of different things, and the ability to do that, locally, but also nationally, at the same time, without having to sort of have a different battery in Doncaster and a different one in your home, is critical.
Yes. Because I remember, one of the projects I saw that you were involved in was in Oxford, near Cowley.
Yes, Project Eric, we called it.
Yes. So was that one of the early projects that you did?
That was very early. So for that, that was really the project that enabled us to develop our Moixa Smart Battery, so the in-home battery. And that was, there was an Innovate UK, so there was some government money there, but there was some really interesting partners in there, British Gas and the DNO for that particular area, as well as, Oxford City Council. So working with those kind of key kind of stakeholders to make sure that we're kind of really delivering value to the people in their homes. And that particular area of Oxford, it's very poor. So these were people living in energy poverty. So really, what could we do, with a combination of solar and batteries to really make a difference to them? But at the same time, really demonstrate, we're putting a bunch of batteries in one place. Can we actually make a difference to how the grid energy is flowing? Can we moderate how all of that energy that's being generated at the same time, maybe not the most useful time, from solar, gets utilized? And so that was some time ago now.
It was some time ago that I went there. Because what I think you didn't know at the time was how, because you were still running all the tests, but presumably now I'm just going to ask, did it work?
No, it really did. It was really interesting in that we genuinely did provide value to those people. We genuinely did show that we could time shift when that energy was used. We did some sort of things around the edges, around kind of to look at, what happens if you think about, peer-to-peer energy, not as a sort of Bitcoin type world, but actually local. Actually the problem you want to solve maybe is your neighbor across the road who's got a north-facing roof and can't have solar. How do you make that work? How do you make that more equitable and control those flows inside of a community? Because part of the massive both problem and opportunity around the growth of renewables and the electrification of transport is that those local grids, that copper in the road outside your house, is incredibly expensive to dig up and put gigabits in.
Yes, yeah.
Again, back to intelligence. How do you add smart stuff? How do you add intelligence to the way that you use energy, to when you use energy, such that actually, the fact that the cables are hardly used at all at 4 a.m. is brought into play, rather than having to dig it up and put twice as big cables in. No, just time shift when these things are done. Make sure that you're able to kind of utilize as much of that solar locally as you can, so that you moderate the need for that. And it doesn't seem to us in current times that it's likely that anyone's going to have the 200 billion pounds that this is supposed to cost if it's just done, in the old way. And the old way is the energy industry has been fantastically successful at keeping the lights on. So we need to keep that, right? But at the same time, they think in 40-year time horizons. Bits of kit that the energy, the DNOs put in on your street corner, they're designed to last for 40 years. And we are now not really in a world where things are changing at that pace. The world is changing much faster than that. And the thing that can respond at that speed, at the speed at which you change your mobile phone, not the speed at which the substations get changed, is, smart, intelligent-based technologies controlling these assets, bringing that sort of smart grid to deliver, real benefits to people.
Yeah, because I think it's worth explaining, because listeners might not know about the project in Oxford, but from my memory, and I'm sure you'll correct me, there was quite a big solar installation on a kind of public hall, on a library or a community centre.
Yeah, a community centre, exactly.
That's right. And then there were some houses with solar. I remember seeing a few of them that had solar on the roofs, but most of them didn't.
Most of the houses in the community didn't. And we did about 100 houses with solar and a battery, and then we did some batteries, like multiples of, and a much larger solar array on the community centre, which was a new building that Oxford Council was building.
So there were quite a lot of people involved. So it wasn't like half a dozen batteries and a bit of software. It was a big project.
Yeah, no, it was a big project, and it was really kind of like, we needed a certain amount of scale in order to be able to say, no, we genuinely can kind of like measure this at sort of, substation level, or kind of like local, community level. It's not just about a single house; it's about the community in which these things exist.
And I mean because that was always the thing that really grasped me at the time. I'm just hoping I've remembered it correctly. But the notion is, if Mrs. A at number 14, her battery's flat because she's run her tumble dryer or something, and she puts her kettle on, she could get electricity from Mr. F at number 26. Is that, were they integrated to that level?
And kind of the first call on that would be, well, does Mrs. F have spare solar that she's not using?
Yeah.
Well, in which case, maybe she buys it from Mrs. Smith.
Right.
Much cheaper than she would from the grid, because it doesn't have to go all the way across the kind of like transmission networks with the pylons and all of that. It's just got to go, still using the DNO's cables, but it's just going next door, right? So there's lots of cost that gets removed from that scenario, and she can get her energy cheaper locally.
And then presumably, because this is a real bugbear of mine, if there was quite a large new housing project being built, it would make a lot of sense for the potential owners or tenants of that housing development to have this sort of technology built into the house, when it would be cheaper to do anyway. If you're building a house, you can put the solar panels on when the scaffolding's up, and et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And making sure the space in the house to put the kit and putting that in, and not in a sort of tokenism way. It's always depressing when you see 2 solar panels.
There's a house down the road. It's got 2 solar panels on a massive roof.
Yeah, really making that meaningful, and then yes, it is easier and cheaper to do it that way. But and the other thing that really we've been working with the DNOs and talking to the DNOs about is, one of the things that's really difficult there is that if you're building a brand new housing estate, then typically the DNO will say to you, well, now you have to pay for a new connection for this whole housing estate. Now, if you're just one house, then that's relatively inexpensive, and unless you live in the middle of nowhere, then they won't really charge you very significantly for that. But if you live, building a new housing estate and it's going beyond what's available on the local network, then suddenly you can be faced with a bill for £1 million. And one of the things that could be really interesting about this technology, you can say, well, look, don't spend that £1 million on a new copper or new pylons coming from Oxford or whatever it is, right? What you should do is put solar and batteries in those houses and reduce the amount of energy that overall they ever need to pull from the grid, because you can manage that energy locally inside of that housing estate. And suddenly you're like, oh, well, you can slip below the level at which, like, you don't need 10 megawatts, you only need 2.
Yeah.
Well, suddenly, okay, well, that's only, 50 grand.
Yes. And so the houses could be cheaper. I'm sure they wouldn't be, but they could be.
Well, yeah, they could be cheaper, or you could spend that money and get the solar and the batteries for free.
Yes.
And then suddenly the energy in that house is cheaper.
Oh, goodness, yeah. The running costs would be remarkably different. So I think that is excellent that you're doing that. And are you now expanding those plans? With more houses and more batteries and things.
Yeah. So we've done a number of. We've done, while the energy industry thinks in 40-year time frames, right? So it takes a little while to move them along.
Yeah.
So we've done another one up in Barnsley, where again we were like, okay, well, there's even a smaller estate where we put not quite so many, 40 I think, but then that was very explicitly funded by the DNO actually, and sort of saying to them, right, let's look and let's go, if we put like too much solar in this place, can we deal with that with some batteries? Like, so, because one of the things that happens obviously is at some point the DNO just says, all right, no more solar here.
Yes, yeah.
We're done. In which case you're like, oh, hang on a second. No. We really need all of that solar going in everywhere to meet our objectives of reducing the CO2 in the energy that we use. Yeah. So saying no is not really acceptable.
Yes. But it's a great workaround, because you can understand in some ways. I mean, I know certainly in the southwest, right, down in Cornwall and Devon, there is so much solar that I think they're faced with that problem. Is they either put more wires in, more copper in the ground or in the air, or they say no. But the other alternative is have a lot of batteries there. You would actually the whole of that area of the country would consume less from the grid, less strain on the grid. That's the flip side of it, isn't it? So the other thing that I've been aware of recently, and a lot of people have been asking about this, is the V2G. The research and development you're doing in vehicle to grid in Islington. Is it with
Islington? So Islington Town Council. So so that's really good because there you really do have a battery with wheels. So we're working with Honda on that. So the actual V2G unit, so the thing which is able to push and pull energy from the car, that's actually a bit of Honda kit. And then we're using our smart hub unit to interface with those and then control it. And we're also kind of obviously monitoring the energy that the building's using. So this is Islington Town Hall, which I don't know if you know, but it's a sort of 1930s beautiful old building, but it's a big old building.
It is, yeah.
And their base load is about 50 kilowatts, something like, and it goes up to maybe 150. So even with just 5 cars, which is what we started with at the back of the hall, so they're like the cleaners' vans and those sorts of things. Right. Even with just those 5 vans, we can actually take the whole of Islington Town Hall off grid. The amount of energy stored in these things is really, it's a lot. The other thing we can start to look at there is actually, Islington Town Hall, there's a really nice venue, like concert venue and stuff there. And if they have a really loud rock concert, sometimes they blow the fuse for the whole of Islington Town Hall. Yeah. Right? So we can have vehicle to party, right? Right. We can actually use the energy in those vehicles, monitoring the town hall and go, oh, hang on a second, we're coming close to the fuse limits here. Right. Let's push a little bit of energy out of the cars and keep the lights on. So, I mean,
the 2 things that I've got to think of straight away is one, this is a ridiculous anecdote that's got nothing to do with renewable energy and electric vehicles, but I think it was 1982-3. We did the group I was in did a gig in Islington Town Hall. We wrote a song specifically for this event. I can't remember anything about it now. It took us ages, rehearsed it, did it. We did it, performed it. It went down well. People laughed and clapped at the end, and we bowed and we left. And then Rick Mail walked on and said, "Do you want to see my pants?" And the whole town hall erupted in cheers for about an hour. That's basically all. Do you want to see my pants? And that was it was just one of those lessons. We must have spent a week preparing our little song for this event, and he would have spent maybe a second going, what am I going to say? I'll say, do you want to see my pants? Anyway, that's so irrelevant, but it's just so I have fond memories of the town hall. But the key thing here, which is what a lot of electric car people have been asking, is the Honda E, if that's the car they're going to be using, has CCS charging, not CHAdeMO.
Yeah. So Honda hasn't escaped Honda's notice.
Right.
And what they've done is they've incorporated the next generation standard. So the standard for enabling CCS to kind of communicate, do V2G, right, has been in development for some time.
I can remember hearing about it a while ago, yeah.
So everyone kind of knows what it is, but getting all of the automotive OEMs to sign on the dotted line is taking a predictably long time. So Honda have just gone, oh heck, well let's just implement it anyway. So both on the Charger and on the car, they're able with their unit to do the V2G against that car.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a thing I have to apologise for on the regular show is that I read the initial reports about a Tesla Model 3 being pre-wired with the capability of bi-directional charging. And then I didn't check the later reports which said that's complete nonsense and it's not true and they can't. So what is it that makes a smart battery smart? So it is the software that connects it to the grid, the solar panels, other batteries, other houses, your house. Is that?
I mean, smart has become a kind of abused...
It's kind of an annoying term, isn't it?
So we've ended up calling it sort of intelligent. So smart charging is smart charging. Everyone kind of understands what that means. The next level up from that is sort of intelligent charging. That's also kind of like thinking about whether you've got solar in your home. Is there excess solar that can go into your vehicle? Is it linked to, say, the Octopus Agile tariff, which is another thing we're working on with there, where actually you could be paid to take that. Those things where you need a bit of smarts.
Yeah.
So on our system, like we're predicting every day, like how much solar there will be at your house next day at each time of day, because we're taking the weather forecast feed, we're looking at the sunshine predictions, we're looking at your historic kind of energy production, so we know about how your solar panels work, and we're predicting hour by hour, actually half hour by half hour, like how much energy you'll have spare.
Right.
Because we're also predicting like when you consume energy, so we're looking at the patterns of use that you have, but also, and critically here, looking at the risk around that. So someone who works in a bank, like they have a pretty predictable life pattern, right? Not to make any assumptions about people who work in banks, but versus say a freelance journalist, right, who might be working at home for a week and then they're away for a week, and you just don't know, right? I've got no way, I'm not psychic about that. But what I can do is profile how predictable they are. So we're taking that, we're predicting out the solar, we're predicting the consumption, but also with a risk around it. So, okay, we shouldn't make too many assumptions that our predictions will be right here. And so then we're kind of able to go, okay, well now we'll build a plan which delivers the most value, optimized for the cost of energy to that home. How can we deliver the most benefit? And then we risk test it. We're like, oh, okay, but what if it was the extreme over here that they did work at home, and then what if they were away completely? And then you're looking, okay, well, where there's a very narrow risk, where they really are very predictable, then you can make a more optimized solution. Those are the sorts of intelligence AI type technologies that we're utilizing to try and say, okay, well now let's try and understand what's happening, because obviously the solar energy is free in the middle of the day, but if it's not there, then you should have charged up at night when it's cheap.
And I was going to ask that. I mean, that is one of the options, because that's something I do in the winter. I charge up at night. So that's a thing you can program into it.
Yeah. But what we want to do is not program it in.
Right.
Because what we want to do is go, okay, we know that the energy is only 5p in the middle of the night, but it's free if there is some sun.
Yes.
So should I wait or should I not?
Right.
And you only know that by looking at these predictions that you have about what you think is going to happen tomorrow, and then profiling them. So that, because you have to make obviously your choice to charge up in the middle of the night, you have to do that first before the sun's turned up or not turned up.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that it's not necessarily the person in the house with the battery who is having to think all these things through.
People, I mean, I guess we have a bunch of early adopter or energy geeky customers to an extent, so they are maybe more interested, but we're very interested in how this gets to be as normal as having a washing machine. And at that point, no one can be bothered. Oh, check the Octopus Agile. Oh, there's a low pricing tomorrow at 4. I'll reprogram my entire life around.
Yes.
Like normal people don't do that. I mean, I might do that sometimes, but most people don't. They don't care enough. One of the things about AI technology is, who is it working for? Whose benefit is it working for? is it Google's benefit because they can serve you a better advert that you're more likely to click on, that you're more likely to buy a thing? Well, in our case, we want to be very clear that the AI is working on behalf of the customer with the asset in their home. That it's for them.
Because I think that's a really key, important thing, is that you don't sell electricity.
No.
You supply the technology that can be... So from your long-term prosperity point of view, you don't need to get people to buy electricity. In fact, it's as much to your advantage to minimize their bill to the absolute limit. Because that's always my worry with all the new energy companies, that a lot of the stuff that I've put in here, has reduced. I mean, I haven't been sent an electricity bill for 2 months because it's so low, there's no point in them doing it.
I mean, there may be, very interesting models where we work, in conjunction with the energy companies. Actually, maybe the user doesn't want to have an Octopus Agile tariff, which varies every half hour, and they've no idea what they're going to pay for energy. Maybe actually what they want is a nice flat tariff.
Yeah.
And they're prepared to have a battery in their home, and Octopus are then like, oh, okay, well, we're going to decide
when it charges and discharges.
Yeah. Because that means that we can manage against these fluctuating prices, and you get your flat rate energy. The energy contract is like also a lease for a battery. There are models like that which kind of like, I think will come to the fore as this becomes more normalized. It becomes more like a washing machine that you're kind of just, okay, well, I've got the battery power thing.
I mean, it is still, I've had numerous neighbours, and in fact, recently my cousin, who already has solar panels and electric car, but they all come around to see the batteries. And there's not really a lot to look at. It's a box on the wall. But it is that thing, if you sort of go back, I don't know, 50, 60 years, and your uncle comes around to look at a washing machine because he's never seen, they come and have a look at it. Ooh. And the fact that a washing machine now is so banal, it's so normal, no one would bother to think. And I think that's the position we've got to eventually get to, where you open a cupboard and there's a vacuum cleaner and an old coat and a battery. You don't think anything of it.
Exactly. And your roof, of course, your roof is made of solar panels. What else would it be made of?
Yeah.
Why would it be? I'm sorry. What, you've got roof made of clay? What's the point of that? It's been really interesting watching.
In the last couple of months, extraordinary. Yeah.
We've been looking at Andrew Crossland's My Grid UK thing, which has a live dash, and you're like, wow, there have been times when more than half the UK's energy has come from wind and solar.
Oh, way more. Well, 61%, I think, was the maximum we reached. But it was also, I think, equally important was we got down to 46 grams per kilowatt hour.
Yeah. And when the target is 100 in 2030...
Yeah. The fact that we've done that ever is extraordinary.
And sort of those, kind of like really watching that and looking at that and being clear that the things that everyone said was impossible, like you talk to kind of like National Grid engineers 5 years ago even, and they were like, oh, when we reach 20% penetration of renewables, then the world is broken. And you're like, it's not true. And harnessing those 20 gigawatts of cars is critical. Potentially. Absolutely critical there, because otherwise you've got to have a whole bunch of gas power stations on standby.
The Moixa batteries that you use, that I'm assuming it's lithium ion.
It's lithium ion, lithium as in lithium rusty old iron, as opposed to lithium ion. They're a bit heavier than the batteries that you would use in a car, but it doesn't matter because it's sat on your floor. But they last longer and they're much safer. There's a lot of safety systems that you want to put around back. There's a lot of energy stored there, and you want to make really clear that it's super safe.
Right.
And it's longer lasting as well. Maybe lasts more cycles. It's we are really kind of. It's a very exciting time. It's a weird time as we are now, but it is such an exciting time as we really the COVID disaster or whatever you want to call it has really given us a bit of a glimpse of the future, because it has pulled down energy. So we are using much more as a proportion renewables in the UK.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. And I think it's also pulled it up the agenda.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the people who live in cities have been breathing air that is, as far as all the people I've been following who in air quality research have said, is the cleanest air since before the Industrial Revolution. You know, for a while it wasn't really noticeable. Even out where we live, which is a rural area which hasn't got a lot of air pollution, we could smell it because we don't have diesel trucks. We've got a quarry near with big diesel trucks. And they weren't working, so there was suddenly this immense change.
I find driving an electric car really brings home, like you smell everyone else as they...
Yes, you smell it more, don't you?
But it'll come round, I mean, we've just got to kind of work to make the technology more normal.
More normal.
Which is what you're doing, and I think I really admire that, because that's a really, in a way, it's the flip side of the sort of, slick marketing that Tesla do, where you have that image of this perfect, modern, very expensive house with a very healthy young family who are smiling and a Tesla Powerwall and a car. It's expensive stuff. And it's so it's pushed as though this is a thing you want to achieve. And it's not all, I'm not saying it's all negative, because in many ways that having that target for people isn't a bad thing. And what that does. But what you're doing is so much more kind of community-based, and that's, I think, really, really important to make it normal, and to make things like affordable homes affordable to live in is a really pretty important thing.
I mean, I think in a way, it's a different market segment, but Tesla have done the same thing, because actually what they've done is say, we're not going to make a car, and it's a bit crap because it's electric. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Right? What they've said is, we're going to make the best car that you can buy, bar none.
Yeah.
Right? No compromises. It's faster. It's better. It's the best car that you can drive. That's what they've set out to do. So there are no hair shirts involved. Now, they're in a luxury segment. They're selling £100,000 cars. So it'd better look pretty aspirational and lovely, right?
Do you think that a battery on your wall, just because of the way it's used, is that likely to last longer or less long than one in a car? I'm just thinking, when you put your foot down in a car, the draw on those batteries is the maximum they can possibly give, or very close to it. Whereas the draw on a battery in your house is never, the kettle isn't that.
Very, very, very low stress. So you're running them at, and batteries gets measured in C. So how much of the capacity of the battery are you drawing per hour, as it were? So in a car, you might be drawing 20 or 30 or 40 times its capacity instantaneously as power. And on a battery on the wall, you're likely to be at half C. I mean,
that's certainly the other area that we're fascinated to find out. But again, because the batteries are lasting longer than anyone thought, it's still a very early emerging market. But is the idea of using, like I've got my Nissan Leaf, which is having a new battery put in it when we're allowed out. What happens to that old battery? Have you done any research in that, in reusing?
We've done some work. So we actually, very, very early on, like 10 years ago or something, we used the batteries from a Honda Insight, and we pulled those out and we dismantled them and we tested the cells and we rebuilt them into a house battery. Went into our Kohler theatre with a whole series of batteries in a theatre in East London, and powered all their lights and their laptops and stuff. That was interesting, but one of the things that was interesting was it was a lot of work. That was fairly time intensive and probably not economic, because particularly since the cost of the batteries is coming down so very hard. And you look at the sort of Tesla factory with their mega robot automation thing, and they're trying to make the cost of making them much lower. So I kind of feel like it's going to probably work in two ways. Like, as it goes much more mass production, there'll be many of any one type of battery. So it's then kind of quite plausible to make a kind of stack 'em and rack 'em solution where you bring your battery on a forklift truck and you put it on the rack and you plug it in.
Right, so the kind of pack as it is in the car, you just take the whole, you don't dismantle it.
You just sweat it until it's really dead. And then it goes for recycling. I think that's probably a good solution for sort of more kind of factory, commercial building type energy storage.
You've got more room. Yeah, it'd be difficult to put a stack of 100 kilowatt batteries in your kitchen. Anyway, Chris, thank you so much. It's been really interesting. I can't wait till we can come and do I want to come and see one of your projects. Probably Islington Town Hall sounds really interesting. It would be great to come.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Great stuff. Thanks so much indeed.
Really nice to talk to you.
I really hope you enjoyed that. Absolutely fascinating. If you want to find out more, if you go to moixa.com, that's moixa.com, where you can read all about how they're raising the IQ of the world's batteries. It's all about smart batteries, intelligent batteries. I want a really intelligent battery in my life. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please do subscribe to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Please tell your friends that we get some very interesting people on here. We've got a lot of brilliant episodes coming. They released every Monday at 5 o'clock in the morning UK time. It seems to work. And we're up and running again. I've got, I think, 6 or 7 episodes recorded already, so it's going to keep going. I really, really enjoy doing them because I just get to talk to the most amazing people. It's absolutely brilliant. So I'd like to thank Chris. I'd like to thank Moixa for doing this episode, and please do subscribe to that. Have a look at Fully Charged on YouTube, obviously. You can even look at the Patreon link. You don't need to, but you can if you want. And that's it, as always. If you have been, thank you for listening.